It's going to be one for the ages. It's going to be absolutely biblical.
They've got a decent shot of going all the way to Athens and lifting the trophy.
We lacked that big team energy today.
We can't forget just what an incredible occasion the last Conference League home game was.
Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, Aston Villa versus Lille, Europa Conference League quarter-final first leg at Villa Park under the lights. First European quarter-final for Aston Villa in 26 years. Predates us by a year or two each. Absolutely mental, mate. I can't believe we're sat here talking about it. But before we do, how are you doing?
I'm very good, mate. I am very good. Very, very excited to get into this one. It's always fun when we get to dive into these teams from the continent that maybe we don't know so much about. That there's always kind of interesting narrative arcs and interesting players to kind of pick up on. I do love these previews.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And I'm sure eagle-eyed Villa fans will have watched Lille's game on TNT Sport the other day. They're in a fantastic vein of form, really, mate, aren't they? They're absolutely flying. And I think the one thing that seems to have sort of overridden the narrative is the amount of rest that these guys get and how much kinder the European domestic leagues are to European fixture congestion when compared to the Premier League. Obviously, not ideal. These guys are going to have had almost a full week before and a full week after to recover before we play each other again. But really, I mean, I'm sure you checked out their big win against Marseille at the weekend, mate. Big 3-1 home win. Looked really convincing, if not for a late Aubameyang goal, just to give Marseille a little bit of pride. They're looking free scoring at the moment, and in a lot of ways are actually, quite similar to our circumstances in the league at the moment, I'd say as well, mate.
Well, that's the interesting thing is that fast forward 12 months, and who knows, this is a fixture that you could perhaps see taking place in next season's UEFA Champions League, let alone the Conference League. Both sides kind of sat around fourth in their respective divisions. The differences is in Ligue 1 that wouldn't guarantee Lille a spot in the group stages for next season's Champions League. They would have to qualify, but nonetheless, they'd have a 5-point buffer between themselves and Nice, who are in fifth. And then they do have the opportunity to leapfrog Monaco and go into third, into those automatic promotion spots into the Champions League group stage, should they be able to oust Monaco from that third spot. Ligue 1 has been super interesting this season. There's been loads of interesting kind of narratives. The traditional kind of big boys of Marseille, as you just spoke about, mate, Lyon, they're 8th and 10th. Lyon had an awful start to the season. They were battling relegation for some times. Laurent Blanc's come in there, steadied that ship, brought them up to mid-table. But it's Brest that currently sit in second. They've had a real Cinderella season, and they're just 10 points behind Paris Saint-Germain, the runaway leaders who look to claim. But yeah, I mean, obviously Lille not quite hitting the lofty heights of a few seasons ago when they actually went and won the league and what was the first non-Paris Saint-Germain winner of the French top flight since Montpellier all those years ago. But still very impressive. They've got a lot of very interesting players, a lot of very good players, a lot of players who have kind of been frequent in the Premier League throughout their careers. We can kind of touch on their squad in a little bit more detail, but there's certainly a lot of threat, mate. And I dare say they have a certain centre forward that both you and I have spoken about that we can perhaps dive into a little bit later as well. But it's a very interesting club, a very interesting team, and one that definitely won't roll over come Thursday night.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And, we spoke about it before. I think I would have preferred, and I think you share the same sentiment, mate, the away game first and then sort of bring it back to Villa Park in the second leg. Make sure you can really control your own destiny in that regards. But, that's obviously not how the draw worked. And this is really exciting, mate. I'm gutted I'm not going to be there myself. I'm going to be away, a trip that we had planned for quite a while with some friends who we're seeing. So I'm absolutely devastated to be missing this game, mate, because it's going to be one for the ages. It's going to be absolutely biblical. but looking at Lille's form, they've not lost since the 25th of February, which was ironically a 3-1 loss to Toulouse. But even then, that's sort of sandwiched between some impressive results, a win against Rim and a big 3-0 win against Le Havre, one of the most sort of famous footballing academies known to man, really. So many good players have come out of Le Havre. But this is it's a really interesting matchup for many a reason. And I think, as you say, mate, when you sort of look at Lille's squad and the sort of players that they've got there, and yeah, we'll probably touch on Jonathan David a little bit later. I feel like, looking at the league table, they are perhaps underperforming slightly, and maybe that is just down to, as you said, the likes of Marseille and Lyon not having a great time, and Brest doing so well. Even Nice, Nice started the season off really well. I think they had quite a healthy lead on PSG for early parts in the season as well. So Ligue 1, there's always this sort of like, I guess, attitude that PSG are going to walk the league, but when they start the season as questionably as they have, and PSG haven't been great for a couple of years now, really. There's you look at some of these teams and you think you should be doing better, and I probably do lump Lille into that category as well, mate. They're a very interesting team, and by no means are they going to be a pushover in this game whatsoever. This is going to be really tough, especially given the situation we're in with injuries and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly that, mate. Exactly that. They have threat kind of coming from a lot of different positions, kind of like Villa, in a lot of ways, really. And that the vast majority of the output has come from one man in particular, Jonathan David, who we've spoken about a lot as a player that kind of has been linked to Villa at points. He's been linked to a whole host, pretty much any club in the Premier League top 10, and they'll have had a link to Jonathan David at some point. He probably is kind of every season that goes by, his demand probably just increases because he's one of the kind of, we always say on this podcast that there's not a great gulf of pluckable number nines out there. And he's probably one of the last few, to be honest with you. 39 appearances this season, 23 goals, 7 assists, so up to 30 goal contributions in all competitions. He has just been absolutely fantastic. That kind of 30 and 40 record, one of the best in Europe. But yeah, as I say, they've got 3 players in double digits for goal contributions. Edon Zegrova as well, who's a right winger, pitched in with 11 goals, 9 assists, so 20 goal contributions there. And then Yusuf Yaziki has 10 goals and 3 assists from attacking midfield as well. So they do a really nice job of sharing goals throughout the team. If you go back as far as someone like Thiago Santos, who's a very free-flowing attacking right back, he's pitched in with 3 goals, 2 assists. It's the same kind of throughout on the they've also got Badofe Diakite as well, who's another right back that's matched that exact same tally. But leading their assist chart is actually Angel Gomez, who was formerly on the books at Man United as a youth player, left to a kind of a host of different clubs in search of more football, spent time in Portugal, has landed in France and has been fantastic this season, really. 8 assists, 2 goals from 37 games, still just 23 years old, which is crazy to believe. Feels like he's been around for ages. But yeah, as I said, there's a lot of names that Villa fans will recognise. Remy Cabella, who spent some time at Newcastle. Obviously, spoke about Angel Gomez. They've got Ivan Cavallero, formerly of Leeds, and he's on loan from Fulham. He's in there at the club. Vita Manone is their backup goalkeeper. Samuel Umtiti on loan from Barcelona. Nabil Bentaleb. So there's plenty of names that when they walk out on Villa Park at Thursday night, Villa fans will know. But yeah, the way that they've been kind of distributing goals throughout that team, the way that they've been able to set up and allow for players to get into forward positions to really compete. Paulo Fonseca is a fantastic manager. And I think when we kind of talk about up and coming players, it's probably the manager that's on the radar of as many clubs, formerly of a lot of Portuguese sides, but formerly of Roma and Shakhtar Donetsk, where he did a particularly fantastic job. He's doing amazing work at Lille, and I dare say he won't be there for too much longer. This side, I think when we look at the favourites for the Champions League from here on out, obviously Villa are the top seed according to all the bookmakers. You've then got Fiorentina, who obviously made last year's final. But if I was a Lille fan, I think I would be quietly optimistic. I think they are real dark horses for this competition. I think they've got a fantastic manager who's got an absolute wealth of European experience. Probably not as much as Unai Emery, who's probably the senior man when it comes to non-Champions League UEFA competitions. But Fonseca is definitely up there. He's got a squad which has really molded well to his playing style. They're doing really well domestically. They've cruised to this point in the Conference League, undefeated. Admittedly, they haven't had to play kind of as many difficult opponents as we have. If we look at their group, they were put in with Slovan Bratislava, Olympia, and then a club whose name I'm not even going to attempt to butcher. They came out of the Faroe Islands. They marched through the 6 games, undefeated, as I said, 4 goals, 2 assists, before playing Sturm Graz in their most recent round. So they haven't played the kind of the wealth of opposition that we have, but to still come through to this point is undefeated is a real achievement, as we all know, given the kind of troubles that Warsaw gave us, that Zrinski Mostar gave us. We know you can't write off these kind of smaller teams, but they've come through totally unscathed. And so, yeah, it's one where, as I said, I do think the Villa are favourites, and a lot of people will expect the Villa to go through here. But yeah, as I said, if I was on the other side of this, you kind of think that maybe they've got a decent shot of going all the way to Athens and lifting the trophy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this, I think Fonseca. It's an interesting point about Fonseca because I believe we maybe even did a podcast or two about him before we appointed Unai. He was a name that's sort of had his hat in the ring for many a Premier League job. I think Brighton pretty recently as well before Roberto De Zerbi obviously joined. So it's going to be interesting, and he's very much welded to a 4-3-3. It's sort of part of his identity. You trace it back even to Shakhtar, places like that. He loves a 4-3-3, and this worries me, as we sort of spoke about on the last podcast, mate, with the sort of inability currently to defend our box. And I think he'll be salivating at that. In the highlights room, watching that Brentford game back, Fonseca is going to be thinking we're going to have a field day here, especially with someone like Joe David spearheading that attack. And he's a forward that can kind of do everything. As you mentioned earlier, mate, he feels like one of the sort of last proper nines, but he's sort of got, there's so many aspects of his game that's great. Not only, he can pin a defender, he's got a bit of height, he can score headers, he's good with both feet, he's quick, can play on the shoulder. He's really going to cause us quite a few problems, I can imagine. And this is the kind of game that I think Jonathan David actually really needs to finally get his move out of Lille, because there's been a lot of I don't know if you saw recently, mate, but all this talk about like agents and players paying $6,000 to Fabrizio Romano to sort of tweet about him. This Jonathan David has to be one of them guys, because he's always linked with a move but never actually goes. So it's going to be quite interesting. I think there's going to be a lot riding, not only just for Lille, but for Jonathan David's future in this game as well. Obviously, someone we spoke about so many times, mate. Would be great to have him at the Villa, but he's really going to be looking at this game as an opportunity to propel himself, get himself out of Lille, because I think it's maybe a little bit overdue for him.
Yeah, certainly, mate. Certainly. I think we all expected a move to come at the end of last season, where he got 24 league goals out of 37 games. He hasn't quite hit those same heights in the league this season, 16 goals from 28 games. And so whilst he hasn't got as many goals, the actual goals to game ratio is slightly better than it was last season. And you definitely back him to end the season with back-to-back seasons of above 20 goals. He can leave Lille, in my opinion, with his head really held high, having won the league championship with them, as I said, a few seasons ago in 2020, 2021. But yeah, if you look at, so he's now spent 4 seasons at Lille after kind of starting to appear on a few clubs' radars after his time at Ghent in Belgium. 13 goals, 19 goals, 26 goals, and then 23 goals in all competitions. And he's on track to kind of surpass last season's tally should he end the season with 3 more goals, which you'd back him to do. Ends his total at Lille at 81 goals from 175 games. Absolute bagsman, mate. Absolute bagsman. And as you kind of rightly say, I believe it was Arsenal, which you mentioned in the last podcast, Arsenal at home, which prior to, it feels like an eternity ago, but not just gone before, our 2-0 home win against Wolves was the last time we picked up a home win with a clean sheet to boot. So we know at Villa Park we have been a little bit goal happy, but what you have to hope is that because we've just had that last game, that kind of collapse against Brentford, that maybe this is the best time to kind of play opposition like this when you've kind of had that wobble. Well, it was more than a wobble, I'd say. It was a kind of full blown collapse, really. But hopefully, that's the kind of wake up call that we needed. And that's the kind of, I think you have to spin it into a positive that way and kind of look at it like if we had won that game against Brentford, that kind of goal happy nature that we've kind of been, where we get a little bit sloppy, a little bit complacent in home games, has kind of been going under the radar because normally we'll kind of let the opposition maybe get a goal, maybe two, but we're good value for two, three, sometimes four at home. And so more often than not, if you come up with the 3 points, that's the most important thing. You can kind of gloss over the defensive issues. That certainly wasn't the case against Brentford. And I think it will have put defending not just set pieces, but those kind of open play situations and how under pressure in these games, how we continue to play the United way, make sure we maintain our composure, don't suffer the head loss that we suffered against Brentford. And hopefully that would have been put to the top of the priority list at Bodymore this week, which means that, you know, you'd expect going into this game that we've certainly looked to tighten up in those areas. And so, yeah, whilst the Brentford game has certainly left a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth, what better way to go and put the record right than show that the boys have been working very hard on the training ground, put all those things right and put us in a very good stead to go away to France in next week's. Yeah, well, that's a huge game. As you rightly say, going away second is never easy. So we really need to make sure we get the game and the whole tie really done and dusted in this first leg.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And I think, it's pretty evident to me that obviously we've been missing John McGinn, his presence back in the team, not only contributing with an assist, but just being there, being the captain, having him around really helped us in that Brentford game sort of get through and really, sort of stick our feet in, make sure we grind that out, get the late goal that we needed as well. He's going to be really important for this game. Wait, is John McGinn suspended? No, he's not suspended in UEFA. But there was Concert that was suspended, but he's obviously served that. I'm just looking here now, mate. We've got McGinn, Diaby, and Cash, who are all one booking away from a one-match ban in the Conference League. I'm slightly worried about this, purely because, as you say, if we don't sort of get this tied up in this first leg, it makes things incredibly difficult. And then, should we advance to one of either Fenerbahce or Olympiacos, you don't want to be without anyone for them games, especially with the squad in the state that it's in now. So I'm quite intrigued to see how we line up here because I feel like a lot of the debate and the discussion has, in my opinion, wrongfully been around team selection and throwing the Man City game and fielding a weaker side there, which I don't necessarily agree with at all. Those of you who obviously listen to the Man City sort of debrief podcast will sort of remember that Dan and I both felt that the lineup that was selected was to sort of go toe to toe with City physically rather than try and play them off the park, which is always a good idea. So I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment that we rested players for the Brentford game and it backfired, but it's going to be interesting to see how we line up for this one, mate, especially when you consider there's a trip to Arsenal sandwich between this as well. And obviously they play
Yes.
tonight in the Champions League. They host Bayern Munich. And from both sides, how we play these next three games could be season defining, could be title race defining, could be top four defining for us, and could dictate whether either side ends the season with a trophy or not.
Yeah, that's huge, mate. That's huge. And look, I think the Conference League now kind of really end of the competition. And it's unfortunate that it has kind of fallen either side of this Arsenal game. The last thing we want to do is pick up any injuries or anything like that. We have seen that, as you kind of say, mate, that when we have rotated quite significantly, we did so for Ajax away in kind of favour of the Tottenham game, which that strategy really didn't work in either game, to be honest with you. Obviously, the Ajax result wasn't too bad coming away with that 0-0, but then we went and completely collapsed at home against Spurs and then obviously rotated for City. And I don't think that was as much as by choice, but by force. But I think it will be interesting to see what kind of lineup Unai goes for here. I think it'd be interesting to, as you say, those three players kind of approaching suspensions, McGinn, Cash and Diaby are all one booking away from missing a game in the Conference League. But Diaby has slowly been on a quite an impressive return to form. 4 goals and assists in his last 5 games for Villa. Obviously, not too many of them have been starts. And I think when you consider that, as John Townley rightly pointed out on Twitter, that this has all been kind of going on, has been abstaining from eating or drinking during daylight hours for Ramadan, is really impressive, really. So I think it'd be interesting to see whether kind of profiles like that come into the squad. How full strength is this Villa team? Because I mean, if we kind of didn't have a picture idea, we know Unai's always placed more emphasis on the league, and I think a lot of us are in the opinion that he's right to do so. But as we get closer and closer to that kind of big final at Athens, does that tack change? I think this is when you'll really start to get to see that. Just how much emphasis are we going to put on the Conference League? Is this a bigger game than Arsenal at the weekend? I think Unai's team selection will reveal quite a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And I just wanted to touch on a few sort of player comments after the game because there was a few. I think Ollie said, I neglected to mention this in the previous podcast. Also, we forgot to talk about Douglas Luiz's silly yellow card, which means he's missing the Arsenal game as well, which is not ideal. But the sort of the rallying cry from the players, Watkins kind of said words to the effect of, we lacked that big team energy today, kind of need the fans. Esri, said something very similar about being sort of frustrated with the draw and how much, the team needs the players, the fans, sorry, on their side really on Thursday. And I have no doubts that the atmosphere is going to be top tier on Thursday just because of the occasion. But there has been a bit of back and forth between a sort of vocal minority of fans on Twitter. I'd say the argument of, well, if you didn't throw the game away, maybe you'd have a bit of support, which is just a bit frustrating, really, because I think when the players are this openly being like, please support us, I don't really think that the fans have much of a leg to stand on, especially like I feel like it needs to be said. Like if we throw it away, if we've thrown top four away now, which it seems like we potentially have, it's going to be a very tough task. If we've thrown fourth, even if we throw fifth, this season's been bloody incredible. It has, and that's not me being defeatist. That's not me, uh, you know, accepting mediocrity. We've had a phenomenal season, and that can't be taken away from anyone. I do, I can't help but feel like there needs to be a bit of perspective. And when the players are asking for the support, we should be giving unequivocal support, and we should make Villa Park the fortress that we know it can and will be on these European nights under the lights at Villa Park, and just back the lads, mate, because that's the one thing we can do. That's the one thing we can do to make a difference. And I'm actually quite anxious to sort of go to Lille away because I think I was reading earlier, they've sold out the stadium for the first time in the history of that stadium, it looks like. And, having been at Warsaw and having been at Ajax, I've seen firsthand and heard and felt the pressure that these teams can put on you in their own stadium. And I will, hand on my heart say I don't think I've been a part of an atmosphere this season that's come anywhere near what Ajax did or even what Legia did. Legia is probably the most intimidating atmosphere I've ever witnessed in person. So, it really is on us to sort of bring it to Villa Park and make it as hostile as possible for Lille and do our bit to sort of make sure we can make the most of that advantage in the first leg.
Yeah, well, we absolutely have to, mate. I have to say, with that game against Arsenal coming up, Lille had the benefit of, as you rightly say, they've had much kinder treatment from the French FA. They won't play before that all-important home leg. They've got a full 7 days to rest, to train, to recover, to learn, whereas we have to go and play away against the side currently top of the Premier League table. So it's certainly a mean feat for us, and it's going to be a real challenge. And as you rightly say, when you're kind of going away to new grounds, to new places, and that should we not get it done on Thursday night, you've got it there in that sphere with kind of some it's just a different beast altogether. So we know that we kind of home games important, and we know that there has, and we have done a very good job of that. I think we've gotten the job done, I think is the right way to put it, in all of the European games, and we can't forget just what an incredible occasion the last Conference League home game was. That rout at home against Ajax, which I think will live on in the memory for a lot of people, and so we know that we have the capacity to go there and blow sides away. We've seen it so many times this season, but yeah, we just have to make sure that we start quickly, that we're on it from minute one, and that the fans are behind us, as we say, mate. Because if we can, take a goal or two, get a buffer to take away to France, I think we can just feel so much more relaxed about that proposition.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Before we wrap it up, mate, we've got to do a score prediction. We've got to do a score prediction. Let me know how you're feeling about this one. I'm going to make you go first this time.
I do think both teams will score. I think Lille are going to be a real threat. I think it'll be a bit of a goal fest. I'm going to go 3-2 to Aston Villa.
Oh, you know what? I can see that. I can see that. I'm gonna go 2-2. I hope we can win, but I think as you rightfully said, there's going to be a lot of goals. There's going to be action at both ends of the pitch, and I think even with a draw, if you can take that into the final leg away from home, hopefully we can produce something magical and knock on wood, hopefully get to the semi-final, then the final. There was obviously the information about um, the finals tickets today from UEFA. 9,000 tickets available for both sets of fans, which is a lot more than I was actually anticipating. So hopefully, should we make it, there will be a fantastic cohort of Villa fans out in Athens. But we've got to get there first. We've got to get there, and we've got to get past Lille. So, guys, let us know your score predictions in the comment section down below. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify, make sure you follow, download, share with your friends. And if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.